Trailer Island Podcast.
Hello.
Matthew, you look very shocked.
Oh, no, I was actually going for an expression of glee and happiness, but shock, if shock is what came out, then that is okay.
Oh, Steve, what did you do?
Konnichiwa.
Oh.
Ah, you did it. You did the language, and it didn't sound like you were trying to characterize anything.
No, I would have done the accent, but you guys have told me off.
With good reason.
Said that's insensitive.
I got away with the accent in Green Book.
Why did Green Book call for an Asian accent?
I didn't do it. I didn't do an Asian accent.
Oh, right.
I did a American Italian, New
that's
Yorkan.
right.
Thank you very much.
I thought it was Welsh when you did it.
Well, you know, I'm a man of many talents, and sometimes those wires get crossed.
Accents.
Yeah. What?
I can't do those.
No.
No, I'm rubbish at accents.
You can do a great Sean Connery, but
I can do a good Sean Connery.
it's
That's about
insensitive
it.
now that he's dead.
Is it?
Yeah.
That's not what she said.
Okay, anyway, that's great. Now, this week we're doing, we haven't done, I suppose, a foreign language film in quite some time,
I feel
have
like we have, but I just can't remember what it is. Okay, maybe not.
Wait, no, we have.
Oh no, that was Australia month. Sorry.
Oh,
I thought we did a film where there were a lot of subtitles, and
Yeah,
we commented
me
on the
too.
fact that we don't mind subtitles and that we're,
it's the one with the basement under the house.
Oh, of course, Parasite.
Parasite,
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
Right.
Because
Gosh, that was a long time ago.
that was a while ago.
Yeah.
But seeing as I know we haven't introduced the film, but on the topic of subtitles, I do love that all three of us are mature enough to read subtitles to a foreign language film, and also still just understand, like, not have to use an English dub.
Yeah.
I'm glad that that's the
Yes.
case.
I do have a problem with the titles in this film, though.
And I know what you're going to say, and I have comments on that as well, yes.
Well, in that case and anyway and blah, blah, blah and all the things.
yes.
Steve, you're still missing your microphone stand. Where did that go?
Yes, I mean, even if this is released far down the in the canon of Trailer Island, I just want people to know that this is the chapter of Steve without his microphone stand.
Yes.
And Steve is currently going. The character Steve is currently going through some turmoil, some upheaval. He's in a phase of change.
But you did have your mic stand last week, though.
I did.
So
That's
you've
right.
lost it again.
Yes, this narrative is non-linear. You see.
Oh, in a Christopher Nolan film.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Sometimes Trailer Island does flashbacks.
Oh, very good.
Oh, Matthew, I remember the time that you got very angry about the way I was talking about something and that time is linear.
Look, my therapist says I've been doing very well recently.
I never said that.
Right, who's introducing the film?
Steve or...
Yeah,
why not?
absolutely. This week we are talking about 2016's Shin Godzilla. You compare that to Godzilla versus Kong, and the contrast is immediately stark, isn't it?
It is, and I actually find it, strangely enough, though, I still find that Godzilla versus Kong was, in terms of the Godzilla elements, we're still trying to go, here's the old Godzilla with the music and stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas in this film, this trailer rather, they do exactly the same thing, but much, much better because it is that kind of retro graphics for the titles.
Yeah.
As well as, I'm assuming, the actual soundtrack. It sounds like that was recorded a while ago. That music, at least. And so it's very much a, hey guys, we're going back to the the roots
Yeah.
of Godzilla.
Okay.
We're going to go back and do the original kind of Godzilla thing here.
Well, you talk about comparing it to, would you say Godzilla versus Kong?
Yeah.
Explain, like, what is it about Godzilla versus Kong trailer?
Well, that's very blockbuster camp-ish. It's got the
American.
American. It's got the high stakes hip hop music as Godzilla leaps from the aircraft carrier. This is this wonderful, and I'm not sure if it's originally composed for this movie or it's actually something that they've drawn on from Godzilla's Japanese back catalog. But this wonderful score that's building up, as well as like all these continuously, charging up shot changes of devastation until it lands on Godzilla in the middle of desolate Tokyo. I think it was Tokyo.
Yeah.
Which for me really sort of actually sort of sells the movie a little bit.
Oh, really? How? Well, okay. Before we get into the meat and biscuits, that's what I'm going to go with. That's what came to my head.
Do you have meat and biscuits?
No,
as a
that's just
meal?
I wanted them. I don't know. I couldn't think of an actual expression, so I made up one.
Cheese and biscuits?
Cheese, yeah, cheese.
Actually,
and
no.
crackers.
No. Meat and biscuits.
Meat and
Meat and
We are now
biscuits.
getting into the meat and biscuits.
All right.
You get these shirts on
Yeah.
trailerisland.com.au. Meat and biscuits.
But before we do get into the meat and biscuits, because there's a lot of meat and a lot of biscuits to unpack, this is a request.
Oh, yes, it is.
Yes, a request from friend of the podcast, Mickle Pickle, who we know as Michael or Mitchell Pickle or all manner of names.
Some of the best memes I have ever seen come from that man.
Yeah.
Well, he is his own little internet sensation, isn't he?
Absolutely.
Little Mickle Pickle. Mickle Pickle has a YouTube page.
Yep.
If you'd like to visit him, Mickle spelt with 2 L's and Pickle spelt with 2 L's as well.
He does all manner of things from comedy right through to his own adaptations of a Japanese manga called Made in Abyss, which I think I can say that without
I think that
repercussion.
sounds
Yeah.
reasonable.
So he does his. There's a wide range of stuff now, and he loves Godzilla, which is why he has
Yes.
requested this movie.
And he sent in a little audio clip of himself talking. No one's actually ever seen his face. We believe
Without
that,
a hoodie.
Yeah, we believe that his face, as seen on his YouTube channel, might be CGI.
Maybe he's a robot.
It's true.
It's possible. Anyway, here is Mickle Picker with his comments on Shin Godzilla.
Hello, Trailer Island podcast. I recommended the film Shin Godzilla for various reasons, but my main being, first and foremost, it being a film from Japan. Both its writing and, I guess, cinematic direction are very different from the more traditional, like, Australian and Hollywood films usually spoken about on this podcast. And the same thing actually goes for its trailer. And secondly, the Godzilla's presentation in this film is vastly different from what we've seen in, like, recent years regarding Godzilla films. Okay, there is a third reason, and that's because I freaking love this movie. I'm keen to hear what y'all have to say about it.
And he is right. This is... I think, myself, I grew up on the American Godzillas, for better or worse, and it was fascinating to see a completely different, albeit the original, I suppose, if you want to call it that, take on this character.
It's fascinating to see when another country considers a blockbuster in their own.
I would absolutely agree. I enjoyed this movie, and I actually think this film shot quite well.
Oh, yeah.
But at the same time, there were moments where I thought it was shot in a way that an American film student would shoot their movie, if that makes sense. And I don't mean that to be disparaging. I just, it was a difference I noted in the culture, which I thought was really cool. The way that they do action is very different to the way that American Hollywood movies would do action. There's a lot more. What's the word? I think it's a lot
methodical.
Yes, yeah, exactly, methodical. And I think, to be fair, this movie, just because of the plot, is not your traditional Godzilla film. There's a lot of satire, there's a lot of politics. I know the original Godzilla film of the 50s or 60s was a metaphor for the atomic bombs. I understand that. But this one, I felt like the satire was really heavy.
Yeah.
But good. But that was the main
It's almost
focus.
a political drama.
Yeah.
It is, that's right. And we see the politicians who are faced with this unknown threat basically just... The worst villain is all the red tape they have to cut just to do anything. And meanwhile, people are being injured or killed.
And they're mostly concerned about what their decisions will affect their own personal political careers.
That's right,
as well.
And it's so you mentioned the subtitles before, Alex, and I think this is the point you're going to bring up is, of course, being a foreign language film, we're reading all the dialogue, but there are so many political figureheads we meet in this movie that come up with their own title in written word. You can't read the subtitle and read their name and their position in the government at the same time. So that was potentially the one thing I struggled with, was going, okay, I need to read the dialogue so I know what's happening. I don't know who this person is. but I'm assuming I will pick it up as the movie goes along.
Do you think
kind of
that
thing.
would be like if it was a Japanese person watching an Australian political thriller with the same sort of template there? Do you think they'd find it troubling as well?
Probably.
I think the filmmaking technique would be different because in this, the film doesn't say, oh, welcome to the room, so-and-so X character, which is what you would get in I guess, a traditional Western film. Someone is introduced onto the screen. Whereas in this, it cuts straight to this new character talking, and they're not introduced in any way.
Yeah.
It just says who they are and what they do, which I reckon probably in the Japanese release has that as well, would have their titles on the top of the screen, would you say?
Yeah,
it just wouldn't
I
have
would
the
agree.
subtitles at the bottom.
Yeah.
And so you would only have to focus on, in that moment, that person's title.
Yes, no, and of course that's how this film was made for Japanese audiences. That's how it's meant to be watched. I just found it funny that in a way it actually added to the satire that you keep getting introduced to these meaningless political faces, and you go, and in the end you kind of realize there are so many people in this chain of command. It doesn't really matter who they are because they're all just going to have their own interests at heart. So in a strange way, I don't know if it was intended for us English audiences, it kind of added to that political satire, which was interesting.
It reminded me, when you see those classic things where, well, I'm not talking to so-and-so at the moment. Could you please tell so-and-so that I said this?
Yeah,
But in this
absolutely.
case, it's like 6 people down the chain, literally within maybe 2 rooms, to get something approved because they've got such a hierarchy and chain of command that must be adhered to.
There was something this movie did that I didn't notice, and I watched this with Michael, and he was the one who pointed it out, which was they would be in one room, this group of government officials going, oh God, we've got to make this decision, quick to this decision-making room.
Yeah.
And they go, oh no, we've got to go back to the other decision-making room. And then there were these very deliberately comical shots of them walking through corridors, back and forth between the 2 rooms. But meanwhile, Godzilla's on this rampage and nothing's getting done.
Should we... the movie itself, we should just clarify, it does focus on a selection of government officials who are trying to deal with a new threat that's emerging off the coast of Japan.
I think it's Tokyo Bay. Is it Tokyo Harbor, something like that?
It turns out to be one of the first forms of Godzilla who makes its way on shore.
Who looks surprisingly cute.
I thought the first form of Godzilla, that little like wiggling creature through the that was probably the most hammy part of this movie, but it was also really, I think it was cheesy for a reason.
Sure,
it was trying to harken back to the 1950s.
Yeah. Speaking of, Godzilla is portrayed by a man in motion capture, which I kind of like. Again, traditionally in those old movies, he was just a man in a rubber suit. So in a strange kind of connective tissue kind of way, that's been continued, I suppose.
Yeah.
But I would agree, by Western standards, for a film that came out 2016, was it, I think?
2016.
The CG isn't at the level of your Star Wars, your current Star Wars. The Hollywood money obviously speaks when it comes to that.
Well, obviously we learned from our episode on the Mitchells versus the Machines that, Matthew, you are the keynote spokesperson when it comes to CGI.
That is correct. I invented it. I am George Lucas.
Reverence is the word I use around you.
No, but seriously, like obviously you can tell
It's a strange name for the cologne that he uses.
It's very strong. The special effects are obviously not as refined, perhaps, as you would have expected of a Hollywood movie made in 2016.
No.
Now, that is not a negative thing. It's just merely an observation.
It's also there for a reason. It's a callback. It's meant to make you think of the 1950s one. And like the 1950s one, this is also almost an allegory for a major Japanese events as well.
Yes, I was reading about the 2011 tsunami and earthquake, then tsunami, then nuclear disaster.
Yeah.
And this film is funnily enough, the American film is actually based on that as well. I was reading, because that American 2014 film, you have that Japanese power station, which I didn't connect at the time, but that is a deliberate reference to that 2011 attack. And in this movie, I was reading by the director basically said, look, that American film is fine.
Yeah.
But we wanted to do the same premise, but do it better, basically. Yeah. And look, for all intents and purposes, there's more Godzilla in this movie than there is in that American one. And not only that, in this one, not only do I care about the human characters, I also care about Godzilla.
It's also a lot more culturally relevant for the Japanese as well, because there's a good reason that the main characters are tied down in bureaucracy, and that's because a lot of Japanese people blame government bureaucracy for the disaster that visited their shore.
Yeah, and this is very much, like you say, shining a light again on the fact that, I mean, I don't know if that's accurate, but it paints the picture visually very well, them having to go to separate rooms with different groups of people to make one decision. You can imagine that not purely in a Japanese setting, but in an American setting, in an Australian setting, just some big decision being made. You can imagine the amount of phone calls that would be made. Meanwhile, it's just stagnating, like nothing's happening, that kind of thing. Let's talk about Godzilla.
Yeah.
So he appears in Tokyo Bay, or I forget the actual name of that harbour or that area in Tokyo there.
Japan Bay.
And he comes on shore, and he goes on, makes a beeline into shore, then turns around and goes back to the bay. That first time, is that when they first attack him? I can't remember now.
I think they try to, yeah.
They try to, and he sort of evolves, he changes.
Yeah.
And we get the idea as the film progresses that he's evolving, he's going through these different stages of development and basically getting bigger, nastier, and meaner as time goes on. There's that wonderful sequence where you could suggest for this movie he gets to his full power that we see in this film, at least at night time, and he starts using his atomic breath and his atomic spines, and it's just awesome. It's so cool.
Great.
It is so good. It's funny that the military porn, which is a filmmaker's term, is actually, I didn't expect to be seen outside of a Michael Bay film. There's a lot of tank action, or at least lots of shots of tanks and missiles and stuff in this movie.
Yeah.
I have no shame in admitting I thoroughly enjoyed that.
I thoroughly enjoyed the bureaucracy behind that.
Yeah.
Like the amount of movement that had to go in these offices to actually get those tanks to move to places.
But also, for once, you could also follow their tactics.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't just random. It wasn't just going, I'll send a tank here. They actually had a plan of sorts. And you got to see them try and pull that off, which was cool. I should say about that bureaucracy side of stuff, it sounds like that would be quite boring and dry to look at, but they've shot it very well. And
I think so.
I mean, even it has been done loads of times before, but even when people are reading, you shoot through a perspex or glass thing with the writing, so you see the writing above the camera as they're reading it, kind of thing. It just makes it more cinematic.
I would concede that any normal person watching this film is going to get bored, but I think that's the point. That's the point.
Sure, yeah.
Government bureaucracy is meant to be boring, and it's meant to be off-putting, and that is the true villain of Shin Godzilla. And I think that's why that exists. And the first half hour of this movie is literally hallway walking in office talking.
Yeah, and it is great seeing all these people get more and more tired.
Yeah,
as the film goes. I thought they'd actually portrayed that quite well. They were getting fed up with all this red tape they had to deal with. And just the size of this team that they had to work with. I agree with you, Steve. That was a very successful element of the movie.
Sort of the most accurate portrayal of disaster first responders in a movie.
It is funny. I don't know if I should have been thinking this at the time, but I was thinking about when COVID first happened a little bit. And obviously this film was made before that, but specifically for us here in Australia, I was thinking, when they first shut the borders, it's like, is this the process that was happening back in Canberra before that decision was made?
Scott Morrison's going off to Greg Hunt, and then they're going off to talk to whoever the deputy prime minister is.
They have to all go as a group to the border closing room, but then they realise they need to go back to the
chief doctor's office.
The chief doctor's office.
Yeah.
But then they have to go back to the border closing room, and anyway.
And then it's Christmas.
Yeah. Anyway, you get the point. But it was funny. I think the film's done its job because it made me think about any major decision a government's ever had to make. This is probably what happens.
Yeah.
They're not to give too much of a disservice to politicians, but I don't think anyone's going to try and save them. Probably thinking about themselves first, or at least very high up their priority list is their career and how they're going to be looked at after this event. And then also just the sheer logistics of trying to organize some kind of nationwide response.
I thought the most frustrating part of those vignettes were how many times the official comes in, gets asked a question, and they say, "We don't know. We're trying to figure that out." And it happens every 15 minutes on the dot, and it's very frustrating because as a person growing up, you're told, I'll never be afraid to admit what you don't know.
Yeah.
That's fine. If you don't know something, just say, I don't know, I'm trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
You can see on film, though, how frustrating that is. How annoying that is.
Just figure it out, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's interesting. Like I haven't been exposed to much Japanese cinema, and I do understand that in terms of comedy, their culture is quite different, and and what they consider classic comedy is very different to what we would. But I did find this film, and I think it's intentionally trying to be so, quite funny in places.
Yeah,
Especially, again, with those human interactions. And I kind of enjoy that. But then always interrupting that, spearheading that, we cut back to Godzilla laying waste to an entire city. And it's an interesting mix, isn't it, really, of vision.
My thoughts about it were that it was shot like it was an anime.
Okay.
And it might be just the racial part of my mind going, oh, Japanese anime, yeah, fair enough. But at the same token, just the cinematography that was going on was very reminiscent of 2D animation. The way they portray Godzilla, that felt really anime to me.
Okay.
I don't know why. That's the vibe I was getting.
Sure. I mean, I can't really comment because I've seen very little anime. All I would suggest is I really appreciated all the angles. I think their cinematographer did a great job of finding interesting angles to shoot, even sometimes are very mundane. And the film visually is just very nice to look at.
Am I right in saying they used miniatures at some
They must have. Yeah, they must have.
There's quite on the features on because I watch this on the Blu-ray. There's quite a few features where they do a lot of miniature work.
That's
a lot of city destruction.
So the city destruction stuff looked really good.
Yeah.
And there's a shot about, it might be halfway through the movie where they all go down to, the politicians go down to survey the damage. And I don't know that set must have been some kind of miniature extension, but it looks amazing. It's like, where did they find all this rubble and this desolation? Yeah. Just because they're real people. You can tell that they're the real people on a set of some kind.
Yeah.
And it honestly looks like all those news feeds you see of any tsunami disaster. Like this film makes a few points, and I think it makes them very well, both visually and through dialogue. It is commenting again on whenever there is some massive disaster, and the government response, be it positive or negative, I think is really what it comes down to.
What I was sort of waiting for is the American recut of this movie, where they put in 2 American main characters like the original. and it's all about them, and all the bureaucracy just sort of gets pushed off to the side a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, they'd be like on the ground, crawling through the rubble, trying to get somewhere because they've got like the answer to a question.
We should mention there are American characters in this.
Yeah.
There's 2?
2, I think.
The American guy on the plane, though, I was like, he's putting on the American accent very thick here.
Yeah.
Or I've just been watching this Japanese movie for far too long.
Though, to be fair, I've seen American films where they still speak like that.
Yeah.
The whole kind of government, I'm from I can't even do it, but you know the one I'm talking about.
Just do your Sean Connery accent.
There are things in here that don't react well to bullets.
Yeah, was it a bit odd? Like this Godzilla bloke, he's like really slow and stuff, and then when he atomic breath, he's like yeeting all around the place, just like, oh, while I'm here.
I think that was the point. Is they get to that point, and the military and they have completely underestimated the kind of threat he poses, and then he really comes into the God element of his name for once. I haven't seen that in the American films, where he literally explodes and can shoot lasers in multiple directions. And at that point, I didn't really care for any inconsistencies. I just thought it was awesome and it was cool. But again, like he becomes a greater and greater and greater threat as the movie goes on. And I understand. I don't know if it was the first one, but there is either a comic of Godzilla or one of the first films where he has these multiple stages. Michael did tell me about it at the time, and I'm sorry, Michael, that you're listening. I've forgotten what you told me. But this film, I think, has taken a pre-existing idea and reapplied it to this new incarnation, is what I understand.
Yeah.
And but in this movie, we don't see him get all the way.
No, but you do get to see him as big Godzilla, tallest buildings.
Yeah, but
there's the shot toward the end where it implies he's got another stage.
Yeah, and I'm excited by that. I would love to see a follow-up to this.
Well, Matt, you're in luck.
Wait, really?
Yes.
Oh my God, yes.
You're in luck. Nothing's been announced yet. But the plan was...
Why would you do that to me?
The plan was for this movie to have a sequel pretty much immediately. The problem being Godzilla in the US.
Yes, yeah.
So that came out in 2014, and then you had King of the Monsters in 2019.
Which I should say I still love.
Me too.
Even having seen the Japanese incarnation of Godzilla, I still love King of the Monsters.
But there's the question of rights. And they were sort of waiting for Kong v Godzilla to come out, so the rights would totally revert back to the Japanese owners.
I see. Okay.
And so that it gives them the opportunity to sequelize now.
See, and I'd love to see that, but part of me also then lament, like, why can't we have both? Because I'd love to see a continuation, even though I think all of us were a little colder on Godzilla versus Kong.
Yeah.
It was not as good as the one preceding it, but I mean, it's a giant lizard just destroying things. Let's just have fun.
Yeah, I know. I think it's probably more to do with the Asian cinematic markets at the moment as well. It's so valuable there.
Hey, look, actually, you know what? I mean, that's a bit like someone the Australians trying to make a James Bond film. It's a British property.
Yeah, that's true.
You know what? I get that. No, I'm not. It's more just.
Why can't we have both types of Godzilla happening?
Yeah,
at
I
the same
mean,
time,
we look at Marvel are starting to do a multiverse thing, I think, and DC are doing the same thing, like with the standalone Joker film. Like, I don't think anyone would mind.
Yeah, you're wrong. You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
And I very happily enjoyed this movie, and I would happily watch this again and watch a sequel. I'm not suggesting that anyone needs to have an answer to this. I just think it would be cool to have both kicking around.
I think that the plan is to do a sequel to Shin Godzilla, and I would be happy to watch another one.
I would be very interested to see the film made in exactly the same style with the exact same incident, but from a different perspective.
Okay.
Ah.
Yeah.
So, say it was the Americans in this same sort of bureaucratic handling of the situation because they are so involved in this film.
Yeah, especially towards the end.
You could tell that story from that perspective.
I feel like it's really odd that the American characters in this film are portrayed as like we're above all the bureaucracy. We'll just do it. We just do it. When the American system is as bureaucratic, if not worse.
I did actually find it odd. I would have thought that if a movie was going to have two governments working together, I would have thought that the movie would have had the government of the country the film has been made in appear to be the more ready to act. But again, much like that original Godzilla film about those two atomic bombs, I think that's the point of the movie.
Yeah,
Not so much saying that America's are right, because I think the last couple of years have taught us that there's just, look away and hope it goes away. But the Japanese government in this is not so much on trial, but they're just shining a light on the way that things work. Mm-hmm. It is probably dialed up a bit to slapstick, and I don't mind that. I don't know how accurate that process is. I don't understand. I don't even understand Australian politics, to be honest with you. So, but yeah, it was odd that the Americans were portrayed almost as if almost like the heroes that had to come in and save the day.
Yeah,
I thought that was an odd choice.
Yeah,
considering but maybe that was meant to bring to mind your thoughts of your history of the end of the Second World War. They actually used photos from the aftermath of those atomic bombs in Nagasaki, I think, in the film. Mm-hmm. So the movie's very aware that its audience are going to be, to a certain degree, aware of what atomic energy or atomic power means to the Japanese people.
Or even the Americans in this story might have a different allegorical meaning entirely.
Yeah.
That's far more based in what happened after Fukushima,
Yeah, and that's it. I don't know much about that.
They might have provided amazing aid to Japan.
Yeah. It was a pretty major disaster, that one, unfortunately.
Yeah.
That was on par with Chernobyl, which is somehow looked over, I think. No one really talks about that 2011 incident.
No, not yet.
No, not yet.
I mean, it is only 10 years old.
That is true. That is true.
Well...
Sorry, Alex, how are you?
I'm still in the room, just in case anyone was wondering. We've been the Steve and Matt podcast with the side of Alex.
Sorry. We got revved up there.
Yeah, we did. That was
and
fun.
that's fine. That's what the power of...
What do you think, Alex?
Yeah, no, it was good. Anyway, so what are we going to... So, out of 5 watts are we going to give this?
God.
B-2 bombers?
I was going to say American B-2 bombers.
Stealth bombers, weren't they?
Actually, no, I think you're right, yes.
Yeah.
Scientific committees.
Japanese tanks.
Maybe the fact that we can't decide on one is
appropriate.
Is
Ooh, out of
appropriate.
5 indecisions.
Yes!
Yeah, there we
Yes.
go. 5 indecisions. Who would like to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first.
Go for it.
This is one of those films that really does tickle me. It's got a point. It sticks to the point. It does so well with that point as well. Godzilla is everything I wanted it to be in Shin Godzilla, and this is a far better film than Kong v Godzilla. That's for sure. It's definitely 5 indecisions for me.
Oh,
Yes,
Wonderful.
Probably one of the better films. I watched this earlier this year in preparation for Kong v Godzilla, and it's probably one of the better films I've watched in the last couple of years.
Wow, there you go. I do agree with a lot of your points, so I won't bother repeating them. I think my only negative thing about this film, and I really mean my only negative thing, is that I do think it could have been a bit shorter.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not quite sure how long it is. It's about 2 hours, I think.
Yeah,
isn't it?
2 hours, yeah.
I just think like the pacing, even though there's a lot of bureaucracy, I think is actually quite good. I don't mind. I mean, maybe it's because of my bizarre love of the prequel trilogy, but I don't mind a room full of people talking, provided it's interesting. Unlike
To set up a blockade for Godzilla.
exactly, like trade routes, that kind of thing. It's great. But I should also say, though, on the flip side, because I've complained about it before, when you get a movie like The Hateful Eight, which is a room full of people talking for 3 hours, that's not entertaining. There's something about this movie that makes people sitting in a room having arguments or indecision quite entertaining. And I don't know what that is, but I loved it nonetheless. I like Godzilla. I always jump at a chance to watch a foreign film because I definitely, in my tastes, in terms of English language films, like the more, I guess, mainstream stuff. Like we're talking, your Spielberg tentpole blockbuster kind of thing. So it's really cool to always see a different culture on show. And it was great to see Tokyo in a different light. That wasn't always just nighttime. To see it during the day was quite cool. I really enjoyed this movie. I got it. I always like satire. And strangely enough, I enjoyed this a lot more than I thought I would. It's going to be, again, a bit long. I think I'm going to give it 4.5.
Okay. Well, am I allowed to talk? Is that fine? Like, am I allowed to get some...
Right, so that's 9.5.
Yeah, so thanks for joining Steve and I on the trailer.
I really like the political satire in this. I think it was shot beautifully. I would have loved to have seen it in a cinema because some of those shots, even just people's faces close up, I'm like, that would look amazing on the big screen. It just looks beautiful. Yes, the CGI is a bit janky, but we can forgive that. That's not what it's about. It's about the story of this thing emerging from the ocean. The titling thing did annoy me a little bit, and yes, it does run a little bit long. But I think at the core of how I feel about it is that it's not Roland Emmerich's 1997 Godzilla.
See, I deliberately didn't bring that movie because I do like that film.
With Matthew Broderick. That is possibly one of my favourite films. And, it's not that.
I don't mean to derail your rating. I just want to point out, just for solidarity, I too legitimately love that movie, and I have no shame in that.
I don't think I've ever watched that film all the way through.
You have got something. It's waiting for you, Steve. That film exists, and it just wants you to watch it.
There is a 4K remaster.
Ooh, look out.
Happy birthday to me. So I'm going to give it a 4. A 4 for me, but it was, again, fantastic.
Yeah, not enough Madison Square Garden for you.
No. A hint of mini Godzillas, though, so I did.
Yes, definitely hint of mini Godzillas, yes.
Yeah.
That's very
did we ever actually explain that their plan, like they're just trying to devise a plan to stop Godzilla? Is that, do we?
Well, I don't think we really did.
No.
We just talked about their indecision, didn't we? No, they do actually eventually come up with a plan, which was cool. Yes.
Bureaucracy does prevail.
Eventually. Yeah. That's kind of the point. If you wait long enough, they'll eventually get there.
Something might happen. Well, that's a good, 13.5 out of 15. That's not bad.
Nah, not at all.
That's quite impressive, really. That's. I look forward to looking back on these ratings at the end of the year.
Yeah, it's going to be a good year in review, I think.
Yeah, well, look, we've been the Trailer Island podcast, and this week I was mostly just sitting in my chair as...
Mikado-san.
And...
Matthew.
had a good chat about Shin Godzilla, which was a request this week from Mickle Pickle with 2 L's on both ends of that, who's on YouTube, if you can check him out. And yeah, he sent in this request. He also sent in a bit of his voice saying, this is why I like this movie.
We should probably give his voice back, shouldn't we?
We should maybe at some point,
Yeah.
but we've got to bring it, it's quite a high-pitched voice, so I just got to bring it down at some point. It's stuck in the helium balloon up at the... Anyway. So you can send us a request like he has done. Send in your voice as well. contact@trailerisland.com.au if you'd like. Via email, you can send us a thing on Facebook too. And you can visit the website and do all sorts of things. All the socials.
All the beat boops.
If you're enjoying the podcast, please tell your friends. Give us a 5-star rating, and we would really appreciate that. Help us build our audience so we can bring more episodes to you. Is that about right?
Yeah, that nailed it.
Very
Yeah.
concise. Oh, okay.
Unlike the Japanese government's portrayal in Shin Godzilla, that was very precise.
Good night, everybody.
Guten Nacht.
The Germans are in this film.
There are. I
Very
enjoyed the
briefly.
Germans very briefly.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Anyway. Good night, everybody.
I miss my reptile brethren.
This is a Narrative Network podcast. Work podcast. Work podcast. Work podcast. Work podcast.